Right now, four nations are quietly preparing for a war most people think will never happen. And what they know will change how you see everything. Switzerland has built 365,000 nuclear bunkers, enough for every single citizen. Not theory, not plans, operational right now. But here's what nobody's telling you. They're not preparing for some distant threat. They're preparing for something specific, and the timeline is way shorter than you think. While you're watching this, Singapore is running war drills for a scenario that would cut off 80% of China's oil in under 48 hours. Finland just bought stealth fighters to patrol empty forests along a 1,500-kilometer border that most people couldn't find on a map. South Korea is mass-producing tanks at a rate that makes zero sense unless they know something we don't. These aren't superpowers. Singapore is smaller than New York City. Finland has barely 5 million people. Switzerland is famous for chocolate and neutrality. Yet they're building capabilities that rival nations 20 times their size. And honestly, the reason why should terrify you. Because here's the thing. These countries have done the math on what World War III actually looks like. And it's nothing like what you're imagining. This isn't about who has the most nukes or the biggest army. It's about who can survive the first 72 hours when everything you depend on stops working. Let me show you what I mean. Singapore controls the Strait of Malacca. You've probably never heard of it, but a quarter of everything traded on Earth passes through this choke point. Every iPhone, every car, every container of goods between Asia and Europe. If that strait closes for even 1 week, global supply chains don't slow down. They collapse completely. Singapore knows this. So they've turned their entire country into a fortress that nobody can afford to attack. They've got 400,000 trained soldiers on an island you can drive across in 45 minutes. That's the highest military density on planet Earth. But wait, it gets crazier. They don't have room to store their fighter jets domestically, so they keep 100 F-15s and F-16s at bases in Australia and the United States, 8,000 miles away. They practice war scenarios on the other side of the world, so they're ready to defend a city-state most people think is just a shopping destination. Their entire strategy is making sure that attacking them costs more than any country is willing to pay. And it's working. Nobody messes with Singapore because the price tag is insane. But here's what makes this absolutely wild. Singapore isn't preparing to defend itself. They're preparing to control the valve that keeps the global economy alive. And they know exactly when they'd need to shut it off. Now look at Finland. While everyone was worried about Ukraine, Finland was quietly preparing for the sequel. They can mobilize 900,000 troops. That's 16% of their entire population. 1 in 6 Finns is trained and ready to fight. But the insane part isn't the numbers. It's what they're buying. Finland just ordered 64 F-35 stealth fighters. These are the most advanced combat aircraft ever built, practically invisible to radar. And Finland's putting them on their border with Russia. Why? They're not planning to invade anyone. These are defensive aircraft for a country covered in forests and lakes, unless you understand what they're actually defending against. Here's what nobody's talking about. Finland maintains underground ammunition bunkers, highways that convert into emergency runways, and pre-positioned weapons caches scattered across 1,500 kilometers of border fortifications. Their entire country is designed to become ungovernable territory for any invader. They watched Russia struggle in Ukraine, and they've built something 10 times harder to crack. But the real genius is the timeline. Finland isn't preparing to win. They're preparing to hold territory for exactly 72 hours, because that's how long it takes NATO reinforcements to arrive. They've calculated the exact amount of resistance needed to survive until help comes. That's not paranoia, that's math. And it suggests they know exactly when the invasion starts. Wait, here's where it gets legitimately disturbing. South Korea has 555,000 active troops and 3.1 million reservists. They maintain 2,300 tanks, 5,900 artillery pieces, and enough firepower to level a country. But they're not aiming at North Korea. They're preparing for Chinese intervention, which is the scenario that actually triggers World War III. South Korea knows that any major conflict on the peninsula immediately becomes a proxy war between China and the United States. Korean territory becomes the battleground while superpowers figure out how nuclear weapons work. So they've built a military that can hold its own, while waiting to see which side wins. And honestly, their tech is low-key more advanced than most people realize. They produce K2 Black Panther tanks domestically, with active protection systems that shoot down incoming missiles before impact. They're not buying weapons from other countries. They're selling them, which means their defense industry is battle-tested and constantly improving. And their Navy operates destroyers that can track 900 targets simultaneously. One ship has more firepower than entire fleets from smaller nations. But here's what connects all of this, and this is the part that should genuinely scare you. These four countries aren't preparing for different wars. They're preparing for the same 72-hour window, when everything breaks. Let me paint you the scenario they're actually modeling. It starts with a cyber attack that takes down power grids across Europe and North America. Not everywhere, just enough to create chaos. 6 hours later, military action begins in Eastern Europe while everyone's distracted dealing with the blackout. 12 hours after that, the Strait of Malacca gets blockaded, cutting off Asian supply chains. Within 72 hours, the global economy stops functioning. ATMs don't work. Gas stations run dry. Grocery stores empty out. Not because of bombs, because logistics collapsed and nobody can coordinate restocking. The war isn't fought with tanks rolling through cities, it's fought by strangling the systems that keep modern society running. And here's the thing, Switzerland, Singapore, Finland, and South Korea have all prepared for this exact scenario. Switzerland's bunkers aren't for nuclear strikes. They're for the 6 months after the strikes, when there's no food, no power, and no government services. Singapore's military isn't about invasion. It's about controlling the chokepoint that decides who eats and who starves. Finland's fortifications aren't about stopping Russia. They're about surviving long enough for the chaos to burn itself out. These countries looked at modern warfare and realized something terrifying. You don't win World War III by defeating armies. You win by surviving the collapse of everything that makes armies function. Supply chains, communications, banking systems, international trade. When those die, the war is already over. You just need to outlast everyone else. So while Switzerland builds bunkers, they're really building lifeboats for when the ship goes down. While Singapore trains reservists, they're really training the crew that controls whether Asia eats or starves. While Finland buys stealth fighters, they're really buying time to survive the initial chaos. While South Korea manufactures tanks, they're really manufacturing insurance against being the battleground nobody survives. And here's what makes this absolutely insane. Most Western countries are cutting defense budgets, assuming diplomacy and international law will prevent war. Meanwhile, these four nations have accepted that neutrality, alliances, and treaties mean nothing when survival is at stake. They've stopped hoping for peace and started preparing for reality. But the craziest part, they're not keeping this secret. Switzerland publicly maintains those bunkers. Singapore openly drills for these scenarios. Finland advertises their military readiness. South Korea shows off their tech. They want potential aggressors to know exactly what attacking them costs. Because the best defense isn't hiding your capabilities. It's making sure everyone understands that targeting you is strategic suicide. So what do they know that we don't? Maybe they've seen intelligence assessments that never make the news. Maybe they've run simulations that show how fast everything falls apart. Maybe they've calculated the exact timeline and they're counting down to something specific. Or maybe they're just the only ones honest enough to admit that the world order that's existed since 1945 is way more fragile than anyone wants to believe. Right now, while you're watching this, Switzerland's maintaining bunkers, Singapore's training reservists, Finland's fortifying borders, and South Korea's manufacturing tanks. They're not waiting for war to be declared. They're waiting for the 72 hours when everything you depend on stops working. And honestly, the fact that they think it's coming should make you ask what your own government isn't telling you. Because the countries preparing loudest for World War III aren't the ones with the biggest militaries. They're the ones who've accepted that when the collapse comes, survival isn't about strength. It's about preparation nobody else had the courage to make.